need to learn how to do circular breathing.
Play a didgeridoo. Hello and welcome to the Drunkduck QUACKCAST. I'm Ozone Ocean and with me is Pit and Barbarian Pit and Disney Tance. Hello. Tance is just nonplussed.
I was just thinking of how to sound as a Disney princess, and I totally failed because let's face it, I could never be one.
Well, you could have the evil queen thing going. I think you
I could be an evil queen.
Yeah, you could definitely do that. You'd be the glamorous evil queen with the magic potions and everything. So do that. So this particular QUACKCAST, we're going to do the Lady Barbarian, because it's based on a news post they did on Friday about this the fashion spotlight number 8, I think it was, about Lady Barbarian character Rose Red. And so we're gonna delve into the topic of that particular aesthetic in artwork and comics and everything else. But before we get into that, we have to tackle the featured comic from the week. So what was the featured comic? It was a featured comic that I'm going to talk about, Latitude Zero. So, listen to me talking about Latitude Zero now. Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my feature for the week was Latitude Zero. Penguins are dressy little birds in white that swim like fish and only live in the coldest places on the entire planet, right? Wrong. They live a bit further afield than that, like the good birds of Latitude Zero, living together on the lovely tropical Galapagos Islands, hence the name of the comic, Latitude Zero. That's the latitude of Galapagos Islands, because it's on the equator, you see? Yeah. You know, right on the equator. Anyway, we start by following one of the cast, a skinny fellow doing what comes naturally to penguins, namely hunting fish. It's all told visually in a very readable manner, almost like a Pixar movie, but this activity is nothing out of the ordinary for a penguin. It's only when it emerges from the depths that we see the true reveal. I won't spoil it. This looks to be a fun comic about a little ensemble cast of characters. It's just now starting, and this is the chapter where we're introduced to the little buggers, so keep reading along with it to find out more. The art is colourful, highly stylized, professional, and very slick, with all sorts of clever tricks employed to make it stand out and flow. The story is very visual. This is a comedy, adventure, anthropomorphic comic, also known as a furry, I suppose, in other circles, but the characters aren't furry at all, they're feathered. And anthropomorphic, of course, if you don't know that word, it means like human. So the characters, they don't look like humans, but they sort of act like humans and have gestures and facial expressions and things like that, like humans. So yeah, anthropomorphic. It's a very fun comic, yeah, very visual, very professional looking, as I've said, but looks like something that was designed to be animated. Like 2D animation or even 3D animation. It is a 2D webcomic. This is all drawn digitally, but you could imagine these characters rendered in 3D. That's how they kind of look. Obviously, the artist who's doing this work is highly skilled. So this is a comic by Pyrogwin, and it's rated E for everybody, so read it. Hello, and that was my little feature, Latitude Zero, which is a little cool comic about penguins. Okay, so next up we have the featured music. Whoa, the featured music this week is Hentai Action Theatre. And Gunwaltz has picked this because it was my fashion spotlight, which is cool. I love this synchronicity. So, creeping through the desert ruins, not wearing overly much, heat hits like a wall, golden sun dazzles and mystifies. From plucked strings to creepy atmospherics, the sound bursts in bombastic wave, high-energy multi-layered noise and exotic sounds with pounding percussion. So, take it away, Gun Wallace, with a theme to hentai action theatre. The featured music, hentai action theatre. Okay, so next up, we're talking about the QUACKCAST subject, which is Lady Barbarians, inspired by the girls from hentai action theatre, which is so cool. All right, so Lady Barbarians. Well, oh god, I have to retread over what we've talked about in our Patreon video already. Like, if you subscribe to our Patreon video, you get to see Pitt dressed up as in her leather post-apocalyptic gear, which is pretty damn fucking cool.
I actually don't remember a single thing that was said during the video, because I was actually just looking at myself the whole time in the monitor, so...
As you do.
It's all new to me.
So, okay, let's do this. Primer on Lady Barbarians. All right, so the idea is that the whole Lady Barbarian was a male gaze thing that came about in the 1970s because of the artwork of people like Frank Frazetta, and then taken on by the whole Dungeons and Dragons crowd because they looked like looking at ladies in skimpy gear and like swords and stuff, you know, impractical kind of look. But the true history of the Lady Barbarian goes at least as far back as the Roman Empire, with the existence of the gladiator ladies. So there was a popular thing at the time.
Subjugated. Must be subjugated by the men. That's the only way they gain any kind of worth. They must be subjugated.
True. But so the idea at the time was, like in the Roman arenas, I think the modern ideas of Roman arenas was just slaves thrown to the lions, or, you know, there to be killed. But we've since like done research and discovered actually, no, Roman gladiators are actually pretty prized people who used to earn, or could earn, lots of money if they weren't prisoners. You know, they would be like fighters or boxing. They're like MMA people are today. So it was a popular thing, and there were like female gladiators. And one of the popular things in order to gain people, get audiences into to watch stuff, was to have them dressed up in fantastical gear based on this kind of stereotypical idea of where they came from. So there were lady barbarians, like Celts and African women from, you know, all different parts of the world, like men as well, of course, but we're talking about the ladies here. and they were dressed up as, in a fantastical version of what their national costume would be. So we had Lady Barbarians. That's where pretty much that kind of hyper version of these people existed. They might have come about slightly earlier in tales of fiction. Like I was talking to Tance about the early the early Medusa. The idea that it was theorized that she perhaps came from, it was a myth. Well, the idea of the myth, the origin of the myth was based on this idea that perhaps she was the Barbarian Queen of a tribe that had been tricked into, or been spotted in some kind of clearing, isolated from her people, killed, and her head had been taken as a prize, and because they had her head, that was a way to prove she was killed, and it would it cowed the people who she was the leader of, and they were able to defeat them because they had the proof of her death. So that was an early Hellenic idea of perhaps for the origin of the myth. So yeah, the Barbarian Queen. And Tance brought up Atlantia. You said, Tance?
Atalanta was another one.
Atalanta.
She is basically the only girl hero that we really know of, that she is quite famous and admired equally among the boys. And she is basically known for killing the Caledonian war, I think,
right.
Which was like this huge monstrous boar. Imagine it was like a small house, and they sent all the available heroes of the time to go kill it, and she also joined. And at first they didn't want her to join because she was a woman, and then she basically kicked their ass and joined anyway, and she killed the boar. Which is really surprising considering that, woman's position in ancient Greece wasn't the best, to put it mildly. So you have this girl boss that never lost ever to anyone. And even the way that she was married eventually is a bit cheeky. For both her and her husband. Anyway, I mean, she is the epitome of a barbarian princess that kicks ass and takes names.
Awesome.
And then you also have the Amazons.
Yes, exactly, which is something that definitely influenced the Romans with their gladiator ladies. And I was just going to mention the fact that, the whole idea of skimpy, impractical gear for fighting, it's not really impractical. It's so much as a little bit more skimpy than us from a modern day would think is practical. But the men were in that gear as well, so this was not a sexist thing. The men and the women were both equally in fairly brief sort of gear. If you've ever looked at gladiators, they're quite well protected in some areas, and in some areas they're completely on show, because being on show is part of the way, it excites and attracts audiences, because they want to see some kind of powerful, muscular, kind of sweaty person all oiled up. And that was, the idea of Conan the Barbarian, the male barbarian. The look gives the idea of power and strength, not necessarily, being totally armored like a 13th century knight, 14th century knight, I should say. So yeah.
Well, to be clear, things like that could also come down to what you can afford, or perhaps what your master can afford.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily just an aesthetic thing, but financial means play a part in this too. I mean, when we see characters that are supposed to read as barbarian, we do often see them as being kind of skimpy, and it does right away convey that it's somebody who isn't part of the mainstream and probably doesn't have the same access to financial gain that people from within the culture would have. So there's a lot of, like, when you see somebody dressed like a quote unquote like a barbarian, um, that conveys a lot of things culturally
Well, let's have a chat
to
about
us as
that.
viewers.
So the modern idea of the barbarian, as it's filtered down through the centuries, because the barbarian, like Lady Barbarian, has existed all throughout, time pretty much. it has come down to us. Is the artwork of them is really influenced by the art at the time it's created. And yeah, you see examples of it, like in Art Nouveau, you see it in the Renaissance. She's always been around. So the modern idea of it, like in fur, leather, those are the particular kind of materials, like big furry boots, that's a thing. Fur coat, capes, or cloaks. That's another thing. A helmet with horns or fur. Minimal metal armor. Usually it's some kind of like a little bit of chainmail and like loincloths. That's a big thing. They have to have a loincloth. That's fur bikinis, all that. So what do you think that kind of represents? Not just skimpiness, but
yeah, again, it shows me what kind of access to resources they have. When you have somebody who's wearing like lots of like skins or leather-based material, they could have gotten those things themselves, Whereas if you have metal armor, and to be clear, there's a difference between chainmail and plate armor financially. But that aside, before I get all dorky into that kind of shit, when you have metal armor, that implies that you have the money, most likely, to pay for those materials and to pay for somebody to create it for you.
Or you've been able to kill someone to steal it, maybe?
Yeah. But if you're going to kill somebody, you probably need to have pretty good armor and pretty good weaponry if you're going against somebody who, for instance, is like in full like plate mail versus you wearing like your rawhide bikini. It's going to be far less of a chance for you to kill that person unless you get a real good lucky blow where it counts.
Or trickery.
And that there's nobody else around to kick your ass and get it from you.
Or you use your hunting barbarian skills in order to dig a pit trap with spikes or something clever like that.
There you go. Yeah, you gotta. But maybe that also plays a part into it. Like if there's a barbarian character that you see and they do have some of that armor, it could suggest that they know how to get things in unusual means besides just like, paying for somebody to make it. So that could be a really cool detail for your barbarian character. Like, I love seeing warrior characters that looks like their armor has been like pieced together from all sorts of different things where it's not super coherent, but it's like you can tell they just like got it from here and there. I love that kind of shit because not only is it visually interesting, fun fact, a lot of armor back in the day was very garish and colorful.
Painted even.
But yeah. But it also says that, hey, this character has a way of obtaining these things that might need a bit of cunning or creativity,
Yeah, so the idea, like you're saying, these barbarians are sort of based on the idea of like they don't have the means, but they also don't have the culture because they're barbarians, so they're outside of the mainstream kind of culture. So they don't have the
That's
technology.
where I would be careful,
either.
though.
Well, they don't have the what I mean by culture is not that they don't have culture. They don't have the culture that
I
has
know
the
that,
armor.
but it might not. You're saying though. So I guess it depends on the kind of world you've created, but um, if you're to say that a culture outside of the main culture just would not have some kind of basic technological advances like forging and stuff like that. I think I mean you could definitely write a world like that, but assuming that cultures outside of the main culture are just like not technologically advanced, I don't know.
Well, it
That
does
seems kind
tie.
of dumb.
It does tie in with like the in our contemporary world, in that when we've had cultures facing each other, like say the North American First Nation people, when they faced, or even the ones from South America, like Incas and Aztecs,
Yeah,
they had very advanced cultures. They had very advanced use of materials, but there was a metal poor region, so they weren't able to have the technology to work metals, at least
There
like
was
base
some
metals.
metalworking in the Americas before the Europeans got
Well,
here.
now what I'm trying to
yeah.
say is, because it was metal poor, they did not have very much. They didn't have like the industry and the advancement in the metalworking, because there just wasn't enough to make that feasible. So
Right. And so there are so yes, I
that's
mean
why it's
it's
poor
fair
in
to
that.
say that yes, it's fair to say that the technology is different, but we could find plenty of examples. Say, for instance, talk about the Romans again in the Mediterranean area, or even before then, like uh, in Egypt with pyramid building and shit like that.
Mhm.
That technology was like in the Levant beforehand, um, and so especially when you have areas that are close together like that, which I think when you're talking about barbarian characters, you're going to, for the most part, not across the board, but for the most part, have cultures that are situated kind of close to each other, at least probably on the same continent. Then you're going to have very similar technologies if they're linked through trade or whatever. Because
Uh,
we've seen in archaeology that those things travel quite quickly.
that's the thing that is the main difference is that in the Americas there were very specific geopolitical, not geopolitical, yeah, geopolitical in a sense, circumstances that pushed the civilization to develop in a very specific way. That does not mean that it was not advanced, but they had no need for certain things that European cultures and Asian cultures had, or African cultures had. That's very very important. They were very isolated and they had a very specific terrain to deal with,
Hmm.
uh,
I
among
mean,
other things, so on and so forth. So if you are building a world where you want stark and big technological differences between civilizations and cultures, you need to explain it in some similar fashion.
well,
Otherwise, it comes across like okay, this is the culture of the people that are more regressed, and this is the advanced culture, and this is the, you know, inferior culture.
well, let's
So,
see. One of the main proponents of the whole, real inventors of the modern barbarian, was Robert E. Howard, and with his Conan character and various other ones like Kull the Conqueror. And his rationale for that, and he thought quite deeply about it, but his rationale for that was that the world was, super ancient. The world of the barbarian, the world of Conan, is you know, um, prehistory, like way back even before the Greek Empire, the Egyptians, everything like that. And the idea was that the people with the advanced civilizations, which were the Seth or something like this, I'm trying to think. So they were looked at as being decadent, as being corrupt, and their civilization was like feeding in itself. It was dying, and so civilization was a bad thing in these books. Whereas the barbarians, like the Cimmerians or Cimmerians, which is what Conan came from, were looked at as being better because they weren't tainted by the corruption of decadent civilization. They did originally come from an advanced civilization. They came from the Atlantean civilization, which was super old, and they had turned into these Cimmerians eventually, which had gotten rid of decadent civilization and gone back to nature. And so they were like inherently morally and physically and spiritually superior, which is like turns the whole idea of that on its head, that barbarians bad, civilization good. So it's interesting.
Maybe, I mean, I don't know. I still feel very unsure, let's say unsure, about what message would, be gotten across. Because you do have the trope of the noble wild man or the noble barbarian. The one that is not advanced in civilization, but close with nature, more noble, more pure, blah, blah, blah. But on the other hand, he's not as advanced. There's, I don't know. Maybe it depends on how you sell it, I guess.
Howard had a weird idea that being, I suppose it's a bit Nietzschean too. Self-reliance and the ability of knowing yourself and your own strength is superior to having culture. So that was culture, as I mean, the more decadent version, as exemplified by the bad guys in the world of Conan. So yeah, that was his idea, which is has its own merits if you like acclimatize yourself to that world and you're sort of enjoying that his fiction. But I thought we might mention some of our favorite barbarians before we get into too much into the weeds of rights and wrongs and the realism. So who are our favorite barbarian ladies?
Well, Tanya mentioned her before the cast. I can't believe we almost forgot about her, but I do love Xena. I think she's wonderful. I love the way Lucy Lawless acts her character. It's so great.
Yeah, she was.
Yeah, she's fun.
Trend-setting, yeah. So that was an original character, a spin-off from Hercules: The Legendary Journeys with Kevin Sorbo. And then we have Xena. And Xena was just a kind of spin-off idea, but it took over and it's way more popular than Hercules. And she looks cool. She has a Roman-inspired kind of outfit, with the kind of a leather peplum sort of thing, and Princess Leia kind of top, but way more like modest than Princess Leia's slave outfit. So she's like a tough barbarian kind of lady, with she had like a sword and a spinning thing that
it was like a loop. Yeah.
Yeah, she was just cool. Yeah, dark hair, fierce eyes.
She was super popular over here.
Big, tall New Zealander.
Overall, really, I think fierce is the key word, but she also wasn't overly serious, especially the way Lucy acted her. There was and she was just all around a super, super fun character.
A lot of humor to that character. Yeah, in jokes and it was a damn fine show, and it was not portrayed as being too male gazy or too sexy. She was able to have her own identity and just be really cool. So yeah, that was a great example of a modern female barbarian warrior. And I'd say she's very much in the traditional idea of the Robert E. Howard sort of female warrior, because a lot of people don't know that. But Robert E. Howard came up with he was writing in the 1920s, 1930s. And for his time, he was quite progressive, because he came up with some female warriors who were really tough. He came up with like Red Sonja, who's not the Red Sonja of the Conan of the comics. She's slightly different. They changed her. See, the Red Sonja that he came up with is from the 17th century and more like a pirate, and wasn't dressed in skimpy gear. She's a very different character. But he also came up with Valeria and various other characters who was, she was a pirate queen, pirate barbarian queen, and super tougher than Conan. And, just a kick-ass woman. Again, not dressed in super skimpy gear either. That was, he didn't really come up with that. He did have a pirate queen, another pirate queen, loved the pirate queens, who was a Jewish lady, which is really weird because this is set in a time before Judaism existed. But she's a Jewish queen, and she was dressed in skimpy gear. So yeah, so he did pioneer that. But yeah, they were self-reliant, tough women, not trading on their sexuality or the sexiness of their look, and very much like Xena. So, okay, Red Sonja, I mentioned her. So Red Sonja, as in spelled Sonja with a J. That's the comic book version. So it was taken from Conan, from Robert E. Howard, and then sort of sexified into this super hyper sexy woman with enormous head of red hair, flowing enormous mane of red hair, very skimpy chainmail, scale mail kind of bikini kind of look, which is super kind of stereotype, cliche kind of image, but she exemplifies it perfectly. And I would have a special mention for her just because she is the iconic kind of caricature look. And she's like, like even like Superman is the iconic superhero, or Batman is the iconic male superhero. Red Sonja is the iconic Lady Barbarian, I would say. So yeah, she's a good one to mention. So Pete, you were mentioning your post-apocalyptic sci-fi ladies before.
Yeah, and I can't remember what her name was in Thunderdome, but Tina Turner definitely came up. That's another character that I love how she was acted. I mean, Tina Turner, also somebody in that movie you can define as fierce, and you don't see her physically fight anybody, but she has this presence about her, this commanding presence, and just this confidence. And yeah, she's not in that movie a whole lot, but she is one of the things that people actually tend to really remember from Thunderdome, which is just a batshit crazy movie anyway. It's far less coherent than Road Warrior was, but it had Barbarian Tina Turner with her huge hair and stuff, and the
massive
chainmail dress, and yeah. She was just too cool in that movie.
Huge David Bowie labyrinth mullet, kind of spiky hair sticking up everywhere. Awesome, yeah.
But yeah, I think all the Mad Max movies, except for the very first one, all had a warrior. I mean, warrior woman of some kind, and I guess you could call them barbarian because at that point it's like post-apocalyptic. They're all, living in these wastelands and stuff, and so
yeah, definitely.
But
and they have that aesthetic, that kind of technology, that kind of look, and yeah. And you mentioned, like, you were talking about Virginia Hayes' character in the second movie, and I just looked up what her name was in that, and it's literally Warrior Woman.
But yeah, she had a different kind of fierceness to her. We don't see her act a whole lot in the movie, but again, she's a character you remember because of the presence that she puts out. And she has, like, you mentioned, like, this angelic warrior kind of look to her, and she really does, with like that long blonde crimped hair. And then when you look at pictures of her, you can tell they overemphasized her eyebrows to kind of arch down a bit, so she looks very focused and determined. And yeah, she was super cool. And then she had like white like football armor on top of it, you know. So it was such a cool way. Um, and that was, of course, the boost, I think, for the post-apocalyptic barbarian. So we have like the Bronze Age kind of barbarian cultures and stuff, and then we have like the post-apocalyptic future barbarians and things like Mad Max.
Yeah, exactly. But even so, again, those ladies were not like hyper sexy, like the Red Sonja kind of version. So those women are. You look at Virginia Hayes' character. You look at Tina Turner, and
Even Furiosa.
yeah, Furiosa as well. Like if they were like to walk down the street, you wouldn't, be thinking, oh my god, they're dressed in really sexy clothes, because they're far more modest than most outfits that people wear.
And one thing that you can really give all three of those Mad Max movies for, like I said, there wasn't really a warrior woman character that I can remember, at least in the first one. That was a little bit different than the ones that would come after it, but all three of those warrior women, they tend to play opposite of Max, but the thing that you really have to credit that series with is they're never meant for Max to conquer, which so many other movies would be like, oh, and eventually he's going to seduce them, and then they're not going to be enemies. He's basically going to fuck her into submission. And like that doesn't happen with these characters. None of these characters. I mean, Max never really has, outside of the first movie, never has a love interest. But I just really, really like that none of these characters were made to be subdued. They all die as radical and barbaric as they had started, and they're not pictured as evil characters for it either.
No,
they're just who they are.
And when you mention that, of course, the Conan movies, and we can include Red Sonja in this, they all have female barbarians. In the first film, we have Valeria, like their version of Valeria, and from she does become a love interest of Conan, but from the very beginning of her debut there, she's they've made sure to introduce her as an equal of Conan, and all the way through she is treated as his equal and better in some respects, which is nice. The only problem is, like, she dies and becomes his fuel for revenge in the end, which is not so great. But revenge. But she is his equal, and she's not looked at, as being a sexual object in the film at all. And she does wear skimpy kind of chainmail bikini clothes, but not as a character. She does that in a vision for Conan when he's actually about to be killed by an axe blade. So she just comes as an angelic vision to save him, and she actually does save him because she blocks the axe that was gonna kill him. And then we have in the second film, Conan the Destroyer, Grace Jones, the inimitable Grace Jones, this amazing woman, as a fierce African warrior barbarian, and very skimpy clothes in that one. But she's never dominated by any man. She dominates men. She never dies either. And in the end, I think she becomes the leader of the Queen's forces, a general or something like that. So then we have Red Sonja, which is played by some big, tall Danish woman. I can't remember her name. famous woman, but again, not anyone's sex object. Again, she is an indomitable, powerful woman, which is interesting. So there's a thread here.
What about, like, I haven't actually seen it, so if you guys have the ladies in Black Panther in the
comic book movie?
The movie, I don't know. I mean, I don't really know
Marvel
the character.
film.
Yeah.
Mm.
visually, there are a lot of like barbarian, like warrior women.
Visually, aesthetically, they are, but the culture of the country that they come from is hyper advanced, so they don't fit in that. Like they're a super techno kind of culture, but they do have that visual aesthetic of barbarian women. They do. You're right there. But yeah, it's a strange kind of. It's turning it on its head. You know, there's the stereotypical idea of that Africa is like, doesn't have very high technology, but the country that I can't remember what the country's name is that Black Panther comes from is like super like flying monorail sort of culture.
Let me think. Never mind, I was gonna make a fool of myself. I remember because it sounds like a town in Wakanda. That's right.
Wakanda, there we are. Wakanda forever.
So, how about barbarians you have created?
Oh, well, there's Barbarian Pinky, of course.
I love Barbarian Pinky.
I created her because basically I was fed up with the diesel punk aesthetic of Pinky TA, and I really wanted to do something else. And I had this idea of Barbarian Red Sonja kind of thing, and I wanted to do Pinky and that stuff. And I did a collab with two other artists, Catch and Aurora Moon, which were two other artists on Drunkduck at the time. And I did a dream sequence, and it just allowed me to do an alternative world story of Pinky as a barbarian with a fur cloak or a red, something like that. Anyway, big furry boots, scale mail bikini, all that kind of stereotypical stuff, and a big sword. So yeah, it was fun.
What made it a bit less stereotypical was that, like, in a way, you hyperized how stereotypical it was to, like, the furry boots were, like, rainbow colored or something. I remember it, like, really garish, awesome. Like, you just lean into it 112%. It was great.
Massive furry boots, just colossal. And they're rainbow, so she must have, like, slaughtered some rainbow monster in order to get those.
Some magical beast, like the last of its species, I imagine.
Oh man, I can't wait to do more with her, but I revived her for our Dungeons and Dragons campaign, which we had all four of us, Baines, Tance, Pitt and I, with Gun Wallace and M Claire as a character as well in that. So it was all of us together doing Dungeons and Dragons, which is so cool. And Pinky was a character in there, often terrible, the worst warrior ever.
It was so fun. She, of course, she always had to end up under her and Helmut a bit. I think because they were both like the most like tankish characters.
Yeah.
That somehow shit would always turn around and like they would find themselves like constantly be like about to die.
Yeah, one hit point left sort of thing, and they or cursed by a spell to try and start attacking everybody else, or someone was cursed by a spell and they would be attacking them.
Every time M's character missed, from her archery stats, the arrow always ended up in either Pinky or Helmut, like always.
Exactly. And there'd be this idea that because they were tanks, they had massive attack potential, they had great armor, and we'd think, oh, we'll just throw them into battle. They could be the first ones to strike. And that would always mess up. It would never work out.
Always.
They would be the losers, and everyone else would be trying to save them or just ignoring them.
I still love that we like fought this giant. It was like a demon or a dragon. I think that one was the demon, and like all of us were out for the count except for little M's character, the little halfling, and somehow she managed to like she was like a half dog character or something like that. Like she had this transformation. She drug all of us to safety when we were unconscious.
All of us, yeah.
As dogs do.
I was preparing for a restart, honestly. I was sorry.
Yeah.
We die here.
I do think a lot of that was probably Dave Gunwallace having a bit of mercy on our party, being like, you know what, go on.
He was a damn good dungeon master. He was good
Yeah.
for us. And so yeah, the Pinky Barbarian. Okay, so we should mention Rose Red. So this is why the whole thing, like, I've come up with the idea. So this was a little short story in this comic called Henty Action Theatre. The first story in a super sexy barbarian lady. She's basically trapped in a normal woman trapped in a video game, like, virtual reality, and she's playing a barbarian character, as you do in games. But the look of this character has a lot of interesting influences. She's got the fold, like big gauntlet gloves with like folded tops, boots with folded tops, which is what we associate with barbarians now. But that comes from the 17th century. This was a men's fashion in the 17th century, so it's not an ancient kind of thing. That fashion, it was a very foppish kind of thing. It's no good for barbarian kind of action, because those boots with the folded tops, they rub against each other and they're bloody annoying if you want to do kind of actiony sword fighty things. They're not made for that world. And she's also got this huge pauldron, or spalder, I would say, because it's not part of an armored suit, so you call it a spalder, and it's on her left arm. But that has a traditional base. You have your one arm armored, because that's your shield arm, that's your off arm, you attack with your right arm. Traditionally, most people are right-handed. And your left arm is protected. But this is, like, it's got huge kind of circular plugs, so it has that anime kind of hyper look to it. And the whole look has a sort of a look of the Dark Elves from World of Warcraft, who are like super skimpy. She also has belts across her chest, which is rather original. It was sort of brought me in mind of Pit Face's like leather gear. So she's got belted chest, which is more a kind of B&D kind of look, and a medallion at the groin and the bum, and like depending from that is like a loincloth, sort of supported nominally by straps on either side, and that just has a cool kind of original kind of look to it. And that's one thing I really love about barbarian ladies. It's the creative look you can come up with the way they look like. You can go for hyper sexy, or you can go for more protected, but you can't go too protected, because then they become not barbarians anymore. They just become warriors. So you gotta kind of skirt that balance of, like we were saying, like poorer technology, or poorer means, and that's what they dress as. But yeah, it's
and the thing is too, you can get super creative with it, even if you keep it historically adjacent. Historically, armor, I mean, all across cultures and time, have had tons of different shapes to them, and a variety of silhouettes, even in the same cultures. Like, if you take one particular culture throughout time, I mean, look at how much it changes throughout the medieval ages in Europe. It changes quite a lot, and by the time you reach the end of it, it doesn't look anything like how it started. So you can, if you're thinking of armor looks, but it's difficult to come up with something unique, I really do highly suggest even just like studying some historic armor and armor sets and stuff like that, and seeing the different shapes that they cut and make, and the different ways they go together, the different joints there are, and like, it's just, there's so many variations and interpretations on how you can armor your body. It's really interesting. So if it's difficult, because I think it is super difficult to do at first, because we get one idea of what armor looks like, but when you really look at it, there's endless variations.
And you've got to base it on the kind of weapons they would be facing as well. So not necessarily all facing modern swords. They could just be armed with, like stone weapons, or mainly spears, mainly bows. It depends on the kind of traditional weapons that are from the cultures that they're facing. So in a lot of Dungeons and Dragons kind of stuff, they just mix everything, like modern kind of swords mixed with ancient wooden weapons and clubs and stuff like that. But depending on the kind of weapons you're facing, you need different kind of armor. If you're facing mainly arrows and stuff like that, leather and rawhide's going to work great. So
Yeah.
keep in mind.
And
I want to
go on.
go on.
Please.
All right.
Fight for it.
I was just gonna say, weapon-wise, and I maybe would have done this if I put more thought into it, but like even variations off of just making swords and stuff like that. I mean, swords have all different kinds of shapes and different pommels and stuff like that without having to make it like a super unrealistic like giant anime sword, which to be fair, if that's what you want to do, fucking do it. They can be kind of cool looking, but when it comes to like practical swords and stuff like that, there's so many different ways you can make them. But what I would love to see one day is somebody to make a cool barbarian character whose main weapon is like a mesa, which is basically the peasantry. If they needed weapons, and they couldn't afford something like, I don't know, a nice long sword, they would basically make what are giant knives, and that's what the German word means, knife. There were messers and grosse messers, and they looked like almost giant, almost like machetes in a way, but they would just straight up take like a sheet of metal and sharpen it, and then puck a handle in it. And I mean, so when it comes to weaponry, think about not only how available things are, but could this character even potentially make it themselves? And I think that opens things up as well, because when your back's to the wall, when you're really forced, you will find something. So
yeah, spears are much easier to make than swords. So
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
a good point.
Point on the end of a long shaft.
Then they are in a way safer to use against an enemy because
As long as they don't get within your reach.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you've got a bit of a hold off distance. You can throw it as well, so it's great for that.
And if you have the high ground with the spear, it's even easier, technically, theoretical.
Great weapons.
Yeah.
And also you have like I'm thinking I have the only barbarians, quote unquote, I have created are for my fantasy series. Because I cannot have barbarians in World War II, although that would be awesome.
Get those partisans in their fur cloaks, they're coming close.
That would be like, here's your fur bikini, now go to party. Anyway, so they look as barbarians to the main cultures, but actually they are not. They also consider barbarians the guys in the main culture, like it's a mutual thing. And the biggest and most fierce barbarians that attack at some point are Medusas. And these Medusas are witches that are basically naked, covered in body paint, that is designed to make them look like disembodied heads with open mouths.
Okay.
So when they attack, they look basically like a contingent of heads, snarling heads coming at you. And the only thing that they have in terms of weaponry is a headdress with tassels that are as long, like from the head go as far as the knee, more or less, very long, lots of them, and they have this very specific, very intricate and beautiful dance that makes these thongs swing, and at the end of each thong there is a metal or if they are a higher rank witch, silver, weight, with poison in it. And this thing strikes all around in their, in a circle.
Killing zone.
Yeah, it's a killing zone. Because even if it touches and it scratches even a little bit, doesn't even have to draw blood. It basically kills you instantly, and it petrifies, quote unquote. So that's the.
I love it.
Yeah, so that's the barbarian warrior witch that I have in my books.
Gotta have some fan art for this, Jesus.
Yeah, I should draw one of those, because I tried once when I had considerably less skill in anatomy, and she looked cool but also weird. But yeah, because and they are completely naked and stuff, and they base a lot of their success because they are the deadliest witches, because they strike fear, and fear causes panic. The enemy doesn't react as they should, and by the time they realize that they can be killed, they are dead already. So yeah.
Interesting.
I really like them. I miss them. I have to write them again.
Reminds me of the Maenads, I think, who are like naked fury kind of characters who would rip people limb from limb. And also in the modern kind of gaming world, we have in Warhammer 40k the Striking Banshees, which are these space elf characters who have headdresses of long hair, but they don't have the Medusa power, but they have a call and they scream and it petrifies people momentarily and allows them to slice it up. And it's a fantastic idea. I love it. But yeah, fan art, we need it.
they are basically gymnasts as well, because they can they and very weightless, and they flip and land on the horses of warriors and stuff like that. They do stuff like that, and basically everyone is terrified of them.
And they have the essence of at least their enemies see them as being barbarians, so would perhaps underestimate them in some ways or not think they're as clever and stuff like that.
Basically, I don't think they don't underestimate them, they're barbarians. It's just that they are a weird thing that just appears, and nobody expects that they have this kind of warrior and witch, because they also didn't expect that they also had witches, they had magic as well. Which was the main cultures consider that only they are cultivated and advanced enough to handle magic, and so this thing appears out of nowhere, basically.
I like it.
and F's them up.
So you've done the work here because you created a barbarian culture, so to speak.
Yeah.
So and there's logic and reason
9 of
for
them, to be honest. 9 of them, but these ones, the warrior witches, are my favorite.
Well, yeah, that's something that's super. You've gone the extra mile to create all the stuff around them. So yeah, kudos to you for doing that.
Thank you. I really like them. I miss them. I need to write them again. Yes.
You'll have to do a spin-off with just them.
Yeah, I should, because they have this entire temple and stuff like that, and very, very elaborate religion, and I cannot really show it as much because the main culture we follow knows nothing about them. Right.
Okay, so there's sort of an unknown entity. Yeah. So yeah, it'd be a weird spin-off, or looking at your world that you've already portrayed, but from an outside perspective, which is quite a clever thing to do. Oh, okay. Well, we're sort of coming towards the end of the time that Google has allowed us to be able to talk. So, are there any special mentions of characters to bring up?
I guess the one I mentioned off the air, Ygritte from Game of Thrones is one.
Oh, okay.
She's very much a barbarian warrior.
She's a wildling?
Yeah, she's a wildling. She has all the trappings of a warrior woman. Like she wears a lot of fur coats and stuff like that. She's in the north, in where there is all ice and stuff like that. So no skimpy clothing because she would freeze. But she also has like a red hair with braids and stuff in her hair.
Metal in the hair, yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of that idea of like, there's this idea that barbarians are like the tribal African kind of people, but they're not from Africa. They are the white people version. But I think we've gone past that now. You know, barbarians can come from any nationality or any ethnic kind of look. They don't just have to be just Norse or Viking kind of based people. But in that kind of world, we have Boadicea, who's the famous Celtic queen, and she was like a bit of a template for a lot of barbarian queens, because the Romans definitely saw her as a barbarian. And there's characters sort of that are peripherally based on her. Brave from the I don't know her name. The girl who was in the movie Brave is, you know, sort of a Boadicea kind of character from a time that is quite a bit after Boadicea, but still has that idea, you know, the Celtic warrior kind of princess idea. So yeah, that has a bit of legs down through the centuries. So that's the only one I can think of as a special mention. Red hair is a thing, isn't it? It's just mentioned over and over. Always red hair. Rose red.
Yes.
Red Sonja.
Probably because, Celts and, Celtic warrior women plus red. Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and Red Sonja, the character in the original one with Robert E. Howard's character, flaming red hair. And she also had a twin or a sister at least, who she swore revenge on because she joined the Turks, which were, or the Ottomans, which were the enemies of this character, Red Sonja, who she was fighting against. And she also had flaming red hair. And I think perhaps that was based on real stories of women, I think, I can't remember their names, that had become a queen or something in the Ottoman world, and she had flaming red hair. So there we are. There's other kind of origins of red-haired fighting women. So yeah, if you want to create a barbarian, you could give her red hair, and she'd be even more stereotypical.
Yeah.
But again, any nationality is or any ethnicity, any kind of ethnographic look to your characters is perfectly fine. She doesn't have to be like anything. She can be whatever you want, and that's better. All right, then we should wrap it up.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. Oh, Chance, I've got to remember your the subtitle name, or maybe the title of this QUACKCAST: Girl Boss in the Sausage Fest. That was.
Yeah, that's for Atalanta. That's yeah.
Still, it's freaking awesome, and it applies.
It is, and she is awesome, and I highly encourage people to know about her and her myth, and how she basically was unbeaten through and through.
She is the queen. All right. Well, bye-bye, people.
Bye-bye.